Neighborhood Plan Committee together. Everybody here pretty much knows, but I'll just reiterate that we have 5 commissioners along with our board members, Cross Crab and Kathleen Pa'anui. Larry Veray was a board appointed member, but subsequent to after our last meeting, he was appointed to the neighborhood commissioner, and now he's a commissioner. And the commission actually reappointed him as a member of this committee as a commissioner. So just, So the first thing I want to do is just start with the purpose of the plan and the boards as legislated in our city charter. The purpose of the neighborhood plan and the board is to increase and assure effective citizen participation in the decisions of government. So that's kind of our guiding thought as we go along our review process. So per the city charter, the neighborhood plan should include 5 elements, and that is designate the boundary of the neighborhoods. And this is all in there, and I can send it to you. I have to write it, take a notes, but you're welcome to do it. And secondly, provide procedures by which registered voters within neighborhoods may initiate and form neighborhood boards. Thirdly, provide the manner in which neighborhood board members are selected or are elected. Well, I guess selected. Their terms of office, and then finally their powers, duties, and functions. So those elements have to be in the plan. So the plan may be amended by just so you know, and we've talked about this before, but just to quickly reiterate, the plan may be amended by the commission after public hearings to be held in various areas of the city, and amendments shall become effective upon the filing with the city clerk. So we have to have 2 public hearings, or the commission will have 2 public hearings after this committee. So I think for the purposes of this committee, what I see going forward is that we make our proposed changes every month. We go back to the commission, we report what we're doing. If the commission has any objections, and they certainly can weigh in at that time. So what I would like to see is that, I think I stated it, but that we would meet every month if we could. I don't know, and this would probably be a good time to talk about when everybody's availability is. It seems like Monday seems to be a good time for most people. You don't have to meet in person if it's horribly inconvenient, though it's great to get together in person for those that can. But just asking the committee, is Monday a good time for everybody? And then we can decide on which Monday, but are Mondays generally okay? So, okay.
I think Monday, because I do a lot of community interaction and associations. Mondays seem to be the null day for some people. And Fridays.
Monday is also the day that the commission staff generally would be available, since all the boards meet on days other than Monday. Is that right, gentlemen?
Not wrong.
Okay.
Okay, so I think the commission meets the 4th Monday of the month, correct?
Yes.
So if we did the third Monday of the month, and I think we listed on here, August, well, it can't be the 26th. That's probably not the 3rd, but we'll set it up. We'll look it up and we'll let everybody know. Sorry, I didn't.
It would be the 19th.
The 19th. Oh, that's the commission meeting. I'm sorry. So, okay. So, so everybody, now that we talked about a little bit about the amendment process.
Oh, sure.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
go through the agenda.
Oh, we really should do that. Okay.
Oh.
Well, this is an overview of the amendment process.
Chair, may I ask, so are we confirmed that it'll be the 3rd Mondays of each month? Is that,
Well, I think everybody.
Okay.
Yeah. So is that okay?
okay,
I know that part wasn't really on the agenda.
Okay.
But that's,
all right.
that's more of a,
Third Monday, 6 p.m.
yeah.
Six
so-
Yeah, here in virtual.
Okay.
Chair, I was just saying the public concerns and the approval.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I completely went over that.
That was the overview.
I apologize. Yes, we have public concerns. Does anyone wish to speak to any public concerns? I'm sorry, I'm looking at the public we have. Okay.
As a chair, for you here to talk to, because I can't see it through the door.
So we have the I can't believe it. I guess having the other meeting messed me up. So we have the approval of minutes from our last meeting. That was sent out. I hope everyone had an opportunity to look that over. It's pretty brief. Are there any proposed amendments?
No.
Seeing none, or do we have to vote on this? I don't think so.
If there's no objections.
If there's no objections, we will approve as distributed. So back to our new business, which I've already started on. So regarding the amendment process that's summarized in the actual plan, we are to study, review, evaluate, and solicit public opinion or public comments, and then report on the activities to the commission, which we will, of course, do. That would be pretty easy. But those are the 5 things that are currently in the plan that we have to do also. So I would say that there should be plenty of opportunities for interested parties to make any contributions or input into the plan. I know that I talked with Lloyd about letting the chairs inform the boards that we are initiating this process so that they can be involved also. I would say no item is sacrosanct as long as any proposal is lawful. If any interested party wishes to seek to provide written input for our review, they can do so via testimony, or they can come in person, or they can submit testimony, which is the rules for that are provided at the bottom of our agenda. And well, let's see. So the way I see the process going forward is I do have, after meeting with the commission staff, I did take it upon myself to sort of put together something to reorganize can I have that document put up? To reorganize the actual plan. To give you a little background, when I looked at the plan, I kind of thought of it as like ordinances or legislation, but it's not. It's more of an administrative type document. So there were 2 enormous things I think that after talking with the staff that we sort of decided, and that was first off eliminating the references to the legislative reasoning or the legislative source of each of the rules. The reason being, if you put those type of references in, it appears as if the commission office, or can be the commission itself, is interpreting legal type issues, and that gets very touchy. Whereas if we leave it as this is the plan adopted by the commission, then the commission and our NAs and such can make interpretations. And if anyone says, well, that violates the law, they can take it upon themselves to go at OIP, and OIP can come in and step in and say,
Chair, if I may, I hear the point you're coming from, but I think even in our rules and regs for BWS, we cite HRS where it is. I hear what you're saying, but I think there are people out there who will have an issue with that because I never thought it was interpreting the law. I thought it was just saying, this is the law we are following. That's how I took it. So maybe another way of doing that is to maybe do an appendix or something where you footnote it or whatever you want to do. I'm just thinking if we take that out, I think you can get some pushback from some of the, especially the older board members who like having that HRS cited, because then they can go to it if they have issues. So just throwing that out there for discussion.
okay. So currently, as you probably know, that each of the provisions have that after each provision. So, I mean, if you footnoted it, it would really be virtually the same thing. I mean, my response would be, first off, I would wonder, is it required? I mean, you, maybe as an administrator works for the, well, I don't know if you work for the city or the
I
state.
do. I
Okay.
work for the
So
city.
the city, if you have knowledge to, I don't know if it's required that that we have those
That's
type
a
of
good
things.
question for core.
Right. Well, and this will be reviewed by the legislative
Yeah.
council at the end of the day. So if they come back and say, no, this is not allowed, or we have to put it, it'd be nicer to know that at the get-go,
Yeah.
I suppose. Maybe that's a question Lloyd could submit and just make sure that we're on the right.
I'm all for simplifying. I just caution. Yeah.
Well, I would say if there's pushback, it apparently does create a lot of distress for the office and the commission because we step very lightly around those issues. And it seemingly, what I've interpreted a lot of responses that we've gotten from OIP is that the commission is responsible for, interpreting the plan. But it gets a little iffy if you say, well, this is directly coming from this law, especially when it comes to sunshine law issues.
So maybe, Chair, maybe we could consider separating sunshine law issues and then the plan issues. So it can be easier to follow, easier to read, because when I look at this, and I've read this several times over the past few years, everything is together. Maybe we need to separate.
Well, if you're talking about reorganizing, I actually do have a proposal for that. It's maybe let's, I suppose we really do need to consider the legislative part of it, the legislative.
And another
reasoning.
question maybe to ask too, because you're right about, we interpret our rules and regs. That's what we do. And it's up to us. I do know we cite HRS in some areas, but if this plan is the rules and regs to the NCO, then they get to interpret what it is because it's their rules and regs, it's their administrative roles, essentially is what this is. So I totally see it from that perspective and where you're heading with that, it makes sense. And I think Hela is correct, maybe we do need to separate those two things because a lot of the issues we end up with are to do with sunshine. And maybe, like you said, maybe having maybe we need a separate section, a new section on sunshine. And that way just puts it all in its own place. I agree with you. It's very confusing and it's kind of all over the place. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Dylan, if you want to input, perhaps.
Hi, yeah, if I just wanted to clarify a little bit of sort of the NCO's position, since I know Lloyd isn't here. As we've been looking at this, one of the big issues that we've kind of come to a head on is the fact that there are a lot of parts of the plan that are not unique bylaws of the plan. Unlike maybe a housing association or something like that just has their own bylaws. They're not going and citing all of these different HRSs and all that stuff when they do their own bylaws. Their bylaws are just how they choose to operate their own meetings. And the issue that we've kind of run into more frequently lately is the fact that a lot of the neighborhood plan is just sort of copy paste of other laws, predominantly sunshine law, but other things. So what ends up happening on our end is then it becomes an issue of both jurisdiction and interpretation of those rules. Because if the state sunshine law changes, which it often does, but our neighborhood plan does not adapt to those changes, then it becomes a dispute over interpretation on what you go with. So to give an example right now, the neighborhood, even though the state sunshine law says you can have virtual meetings in its most current iteration, right now there's nothing in the neighborhood plan that says that you're allowed to have virtual meetings. So even though you would make the assumption that, yes, the state law would currently supersede the neighborhood plan, it still kind of then just becomes an issue of, well, then what's the point of our document? And so that's kind of what our office is looking at. How do we rectify that? And that may include removing sunshine law out of the plan, but then that will require a bigger deep dive on our end to help you guys out with figuring out what parts can be removed. But to give another example, and this is another interesting case, if we're reading it correctly, the current sunshine law says that if you have virtual and in-person hybrid meetings, then the only way to be allowed to vote would be either by unanimous consent or by a roll call vote. And that's a very different change from what our neighborhood plan currently allows, which is the other 4 ways of voting. So when you have these types of different discrepancies, that's really what we're interested in trying to address. So we're going to probably take that upon ourselves to do more of that background research and provide that with you. But really what we're aiming for would be to, not just from the NCO's perspective, but also from just like the commission's perspective when it comes to doing the complaint process and whatnot. Oftentimes when people file complaints, they're not filing complaints against the neighborhood plan's own specific bylaws. Oftentimes they're filing complaints about things that are sunshine law related. Maybe it's not turning in an agenda on time or, something like that. And then it becomes a jurisdiction issue of, well, whose court is it in? Is it the commission's Kuleana to be able to opine on whether or not a board member broke sunshine law? And so that's kind of the difficulty we're having, and that's the angle we're taking.
Thank you. Let me go to Cross real quick. Cross, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I wanted to kind of add on to Commissioner Bernal's points and also Dylan's. For my experience too, like, I don't know, I think separating, some of the neighborhood board plan rules and then versus the, whatever statutes that we include in it would be helpful. But also I think the name of the plan, I don't know, I feel like people don't think the neighborhood board plan holds weight because it just says plan, versus guidelines and such. And so to the ordinary public who aren't super accustomed to the neighborhood commission, rules, regulations, they don't understand that, it's supposed to be basically like the set rules and how we govern ourselves. Because when people have acted up in my subcommittee meetings or even in my overall board meetings, I've cited that I'm making this ruling because of we're trying to follow the neighborhood board plan, and their reaction is, oh, because you follow the rules that means you can do whatever you like. And it's like, no, that's not what we're trying to do. But again, everything is being held in the decorum that is put forth in the plan, but people don't understand that because they think it's just a plan, not actual guidelines, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Mahia.
So, with what Dylan has shared with us, maybe we need to consider bylaw for the neighborhood boards. I operate a 501 and we operate by a set of bylaws. And it makes for much easier function and effectiveness. So maybe we would consider it to become bylaws for the neighborhood boards.
So just to clarify, what you're suggesting is, there is a requirement for the neighborhood plan.
Right.
So what you're suggesting is a separate set of documents, like a set of bylaws? Is that what you're?
Bylaws that we could pull out from what's here.
Right.
Yeah, if we were to separate, sunshine law and then create what pertains to neighborhood boards, that becomes their bylaws and we can add or subtract from creating bylaws.
I wouldn't call them bylaws. I
Okay.
would call them, because it's a city
Okay,
thing.
or something, yeah.
City, it's either administrative rules or rules and regulations, but I totally hear where you're going
Yeah.
with that. And I absolutely love the idea of putting out the sunshine stuff, because I agree with Cross. And I think Cross, you were
Cross and
also
Dylan.
thinking of maybe renaming it instead of calling it a plan, calling it
Yeah.
something else.
Well, there again, does say that there has to be a neighborhood plan
Okay.
in the charter.
In the
So-
charter.
Then there's nothing we can do.
Yeah, so that's why I was suggesting
To
that.
keep the name.
Well, the interesting thing is the real way it's written, and the organization that I had sort of suggested was because of the fact they talk about organizing boards, and then we have all the geographical stuff that's really sort of superfluous, because at this point, all the boards, except there's one by the airport, they're already all formed, and then they talk about termination of the board. I mean, it's mature, it's items that should be somewhere, but you don't really think of them as the governing
Right.
documents of the
I agree.
board. So, I mean, if it doesn't suggest that it's not allowable to, pull stuff out and create guidelines for the board as a separate type of entity or documentation itself. I mean, that's something to consider. Any thoughts?
I think it would be the wrong path if we were to say, yeah, we have to have the neighborhood plan because it's required by charter in terms of the operation of neighborhood system. So you need neighborhood plan. Perhaps plan is a misnomer, but in order to change it, you got to change the charter. So I would think that to make it simple, just go and look at the plan. To try to set up a whole set of bylaws is going to be confusing because people are going to ask, what do we follow? The plan or bylaws, which one supersedes the other? The other thing is that for the neighborhood plan, it says itself that this plan and any rule adopted in accordance with chapter 20, whatever that is, shall have the force and effect of law. So it is something that's already established. And I think that if we try to restructure the whole thing and change it, it's going to just cause a lot of confusion amongst the boards, like what rules or guidelines do we follow? You can broaden the plan by, if you wanted more specificity, by developing certain guidelines. For example, running a meeting or the quorum perhaps, because that's where you have a lot of problem in terms of complaints that the commission receives. But the commission already has things that help to guide the boards because they have the guidebook, and maybe that needs to be beefed up or looked at in conjunction with neighborhood plan review. So I think that if we say we're going to establish a whole bunch of new bylaws, and I think,
I just think,
it's just going to be too much to try to figure out.
Well, not establish new bylaws, but if we were to separate it, and I guess we can't call it bylaws according to the city, so we stay with the plan, but just again, separating it out.
I think I agree with Mayhem. I think pulling out the OIP, the sunshine stuff, or putting it in its own section in the back or section 7 or whatever, might make a whole lot of sense. Just because it gets very confusing.
Yeah.
And that is in of itself its own thing already. I mean, we have to take training on it or something, so having it in here other than saying we follow sunshine and here you can look it up here, maybe that's a better way to go. Well, I hear what Dylan's saying. I
Yeah.
totally get it.
Okay, Dylan, would you like to weigh in, please?
Yeah, so, and I know that there are other people online. I'm not sure all of who is online, but it's more just for informational purposes. But, just to kind of get everyone on the same page, when we're discussing bylaws, what we're really after is looking at things that are specifically unique to the neighborhood board system. For example, Robert's rules might say there are a million different ways you can vote. You can draw names out of a hat. You could do secret ballots. You could do whatever, as long as it's determined to be fair by your organization. However, a specific bylaw is how the neighborhood board plan says that we only allow these 4 ways of doing it. So really, when you start taking things out, if you were to consider pulling out sunshine law and whatnot, when you start stripping things away, ultimately then you're left with a frame of reference on what is currently left in here that's actually the neighborhood board's own specific rule set. And I think that would probably maybe be a helpful start that our office can assist with. But it would basically be looking at what all is left in order to sort of work on a framework, if that's the route that needs to be taken. And what we thought was interesting was the Youth Commission. They're the one of the more recent organizations that's formed through the city, and their bylaws, which I think they actually just call bylaws, but maybe that was written in their own when they were established. But theirs is basically 2.5 pages, and I know that they are a commission that doesn't oversee a board system. So obviously you have to have 2 different sets of rules, one for the commission and then one for the neighborhood boards. But I think what we were curious when we were doing some background research was sort of just how they were able to get something that was much more, I guess, stripped down and less complicated. Of course, there are definitely issues that need to be expanded upon. And if you guys ever want reference to us on types of things that we often come across, I'll give you an example right now. We're often asked in our capacity at the NCO of like, what the heck do we do with committees? There's so much that can be left to be desired on spelling out how committees operate. And so that's one example of that can be looked at in terms of expansion. But then that would once again sort of fall into its own bylaws and not necessarily pulled from somewhere in the city or the state law on how you run committees. So that would be you guys creating your own rules on how you think a committee should operate.
Okay.
Question before I share screen. Let me know when I want to run. But you had those 2 files. I didn't. Which one?
Yeah, the shorter one was the one in the outline.
There's this one.
The other one. So when we were talking, I mean, this was the proposal that I just came up with. So
Let me share. So, share.
yeah, and it's sort of like in the same vein. So it's split into 4 parts and with chapters and sub-chapters. First one's just the general procedure. You can go to the next page if everyone wants to take a look at it. The second one, and because we talked about reorganizing, put the neighborhood board first, because, you know, if it gets back to the purpose, you know, we're here for the boards. So you start with the powers and the duties and then the rules. And basically this doesn't change. This is everything that's in the current board, it just moves things around. And then the elections, please, and then you can keep going. So everything that's in the current plan, the geography, this is only part of the geography. The actual boundaries and such are in the appendix because they just take up a lot of space and you don't really need it. So, and we see that. So go down. And then next is the actual commission. And that's based upon what we currently have. Yeah. And then instead of a separate section, the complaint procedure is just a subsection for the commission, because it's a commission activity or a commission perform something to perform. Okay, so you can go down. And then, so they're only, this is the 4th part is just the amendment process, and that always goes at the end. So it's all part. And then you have your appendix, which is just, that's all the actual descriptions. So you don't need all the sections and everything like that. It's purely just the descriptions. If you keep going.
It's changed when boards, they change their geographic areas. Do you change anything?
If boards did change, yes.
Do you put it in the?
That would be an amendment.
Yeah, and
So it would be the current process then, because it's not changed during the course of when those changes occur.
Yeah, the last update I believe was 2019.
Yeah.
This is minor amendments. It wasn't a full review of the plan, but you do have to do it within 10 years. So I can't answer your question specifically. I know that core range development is new. You know, that would be added to a board. Other than that, I'm not sure.
That's when you do the changes, when we do the whole review.
Well, I don't think we were talking about doing geographical.
No, but boards may change their
Well, Salt Lake added the
Yeah,
airport,
yeah. When they add things, for example, we don't change the verbiage in the plan, right?
I'd like to believe that.
Yeah,
was
there's-
meant.
And it
So that's
says,
another.
yeah, it says when it was formed and then it was at last amended. So yeah, they should change.
So if you know of anything that need to be amended,
Oh, that-
bring that to our attention.
Well, like Kathleen just said, Salt Lake changed, for example, they added, or took out a
They
portion.
brought in the airport area.
Yeah, so for example, that I think we didn't change anything, although we know that we made that change. The explanation of what was added. We have that information, so I take it in the next round when we make changes to the plan, the geographic boundaries for that particular board would then be changed. Based on what happened previously.
So let me just finish the last section, if you just go up to right there, is just the formation and termination. And that is required, as I mentioned earlier, required by the charter to be in there. But it's not really something that's going to be utilized very often. So that's why I put it as Appendix B.
I love this. I like how you flipped it. I think that's great.
Larry?
I just want to mention, to get back to what we were discussing before, there was a major reapportionment done. It impacted Pearl City tremendously. I talked to Bill Hicks yesterday, and I asked him what top issues he had. And one of the things he said, that he did his own study recently, looking at his sub-districts. The population had changed in those districts. He said on one of them, had 7 board members for one district. He says after he reviewed it, it needs to be brought down to 5. And another one that was at 3 needs to be raised to 5.
But that's within that board's district period.
Yes.
That's a board
Yes.
issue. That's something they'll have to deal with.
So
Yeah.
geography didn't change, but
But he
population.
doesn't think anybody's really managed that well since 1970.
Probably
Well,
not.
can I ask that we sort of
I'm sorry.
defer the geographical and population changes? I mean, maybe that is something when we're done with, I think a revision of the plan that we can look at that time and try to tackle that if the commission wants to do that.
Maybe maybe the NA staff could do that because that's more nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
And I think Bill brings up a good point, and if he's brought it up, he's going to bring it up. I know Bill, he will bring it before us and ask us to take a look at that, but maybe that's more of a nuts and bolts thing. I don't think we need to worry about it.
Yeah, I think we're going to have enough of a time trying to
Yeah.
do the plan, the real substantive
I agree.
provisions as opposed to getting in all the, I mean, yeah,
But if the NAs, if you guys could do that kind of stuff, research on geographic and population sub-districts and things like that, maybe that's something your office could do versus us worrying about it, and you can just say, here's what we found, and like, okay, thank you, duly noted.
I'm not sure how we would start addressing that.
I don't know either.
yeah, I think that would be something
you go.
after we get done, and then we can pull I know like Chinatown's actively, or at least from a meeting I went, they're actively trying to swap territory with another board. So people are out there thinking about it, but yeah, that's a kind of a big task, and we can easily get sidetracked
Yeah,
into
the
that.
numbers aren't designated in the plan, are they? The number of board members for each
No.
board. Yeah, it's just a geographic
Yeah,
boundary.
purely.
So, yeah, that's not something you have to do there, although you could as an exercise, which is not going to be easy.
So there's, sorry, sure.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, just with boundaries and everything. There's sections in the plan that say how you can go about doing that. And you don't have to, this big amendment process we're doing right now is the review of the neighborhood plan, right? But amendments, as you've seen, they can be made in 2019. That doesn't restart the clock. So we're in this
And technically,
project right now, so.
technically, as I recall reading through the plan, I might be wrong, is the amendment process for geographical redesignations is actually a lesser standard. You don't have to go through the 2 public hearings, I don't believe. So, yeah, it's a petition process. I mean, there is a petition process to do amendments too, but in any event, yeah, I think that type of stuff we can look after we're done. That's a big task and that would require a little bit of thought. But in any event, so the parts about making, to me, like the process of making those type of requests, that's in the plan, or that's in the actual beef of
Yeah, I
the
agree.
commission stuff. So anyway, that's the organizational
I like it.
suggest, that's not pulling out the sunshine, but that might be a little hairier because you have sunshine issues with the commission, you have sunshine issues with the boards, and then you start, you know, I don't know, that would be something to think
It's not
about,
nice and neat, but
how we can do it. Yeah, because, you start dicing things up one way, then you lose out on dicing it up the other and just have to make choices. Well, anyway, I can send this out to everybody. It's something, obviously I don't want to take action because you haven't seen it, it wasn't on the agenda. So it's just something to think about. If anyone has any organizational thoughts, please bring it to the next meeting. But I think this might be if we can kind of start with what we want to organize and, like a document, that way we can start attacking
I agree.
specific
I
issues.
if anything, I think plan needs is a table of contents where you see all of the sections at the beginning of
Thank
the
you.
plan, because otherwise you gotta flip through all the pages to see what's in that particular section. But that'll be a simple thing to do. I think just
Yeah, the
pulling all this
title,
out, put it in one place.
and this doesn't have the title page or anything. So all that stuff, that can be done easily.
So can we just go back to outreach really quickly?
Outreach, yeah.
Yeah, to let people know what we're doing.
Oh, yes.
That's kind of my thing. I think if maybe one of you guys could draft or have Lloyd draft a letter or something that we can then send out to all of our board members, I think would be great. I mean, I know you guys do, but not all board members have email addresses. We all have them, but you guys won't necessarily have them. Trust me, I know this, I do, I know. I look at my list.
But this letter is announcing that the committee has begun.
And if you have
see
questions,
Monday of almost every month.
or you can email, you can, as Chair mentioned, all the different ways people can submit.
Proposals for change.
And it is a good time because we haven't made any decisions with this, just our first organizing. So hopefully next meeting we can make some basic decisions. Go ahead, Larry.
I just want to suggest, I'm trying to think of this process, because I was thinking the same thing. But I think the chairs to be responsible for collecting all the information and I'm thinking about where it's going. He doesn't need to read 380 different documents coming in. I think if the chair looks at it and says, okay, all the board members solicited, or they provided their recommendations, and you can see all the things that are redundant, they all said the same thing. I think that the chairs can say, for example, Pearl City Neighborhood Board, this is our wish list and priorities that we like to see in the neighborhood plan.
Yeah, but I can tell you right now, a lot of chairs don't do that. You and I are probably two of the exceptions.
I'm just trying to think of
I was also thinking, are we the point of contact or would Chair Smith be the point of contact?
Right,
Well,
correct.
I mean, Just create a public file. We've been utilizing Google Drives with all the boards.
That's a
the
great
big one for the
idea.
Commission, and then have a folder with all of that information and everyone can stay up to date on what's coming in.
That's fine. Yeah, I'd be happy. I mean, I've done this process before. I had my own website because doing the change tracking, especially and I was giving this some thought as to whether you literally have to make amendments for all these things. Because I'm thinking like organization, writing that up is actually sort of challenging. And as opposed to, do you just present it to the mayor and the mayor says, okay, this is good. And it's a big difference because when you do change logs, and I had a document, that I did, and we didn't even do like this math. Well, we did a little bit of it. I mean, it was voluminous by the time we got done with it because you had to track everything.
Mhm.
And I know start at the beginning because going backwards is really tough. But anyway, I'd be happy to do that and just put all in that way to track everything. I don't know if we want to do that with the NCO, but I guess we can work on that. But anyway,
Yeah.
but that's something I'm keeping
Committee
track of.
members could be editors, so if you do receive anything, you can upload it yourself to the Google Drive folder. But again, it's just something that's public.
Yeah.
It serves as a board packet in a sense. Or I
Okay.
call it a board packet, but
That would be great. Well, Dylan, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think that, from the, NCO perspective, I think that we definitely want to see the commission work on something that would ultimately be a very big, step forward in making positive changes. You know, I know that there are some things that seem very daunting because they're a lot of work, but at the same time, they would also just provide a lot of clarity in terms of how we actually, on your end, how you interpret the rules, but then on the NCO's end when it comes to day-to-day affairs and how we actually sort of administer when people ask us questions. Like, for example, I know that there was discussion on sort of population and boundaries and stuff like that. And I know that that sounds like a big task, but you almost have to ask yourself, well, at a certain point, is it worth it if it means that we can actually get some clarity on some things? I know that, you know, ultimately it's always been sort of a default back to, well, if there ever does need to be a change in a board's quorum or something like that, then it can just be brought to the commission and the commission can make a change. And that does work. But then at the same time, you go, well, if we could just fix that and find a different way of fixing that, then that might be something worth exploring. So I think that, you know, we would be appreciative if that's sort of kept in mind in terms of how we can help you guys as well. You know, figuring out just fixes for things.
Okay. Well, can I ask, I don't know if this would step on Lloyd's toes or anything, but if Larry would be so willing that Larry could serve as our outreach to the board chairs, since he's done it numerous times, and I'm volunteering you if that's, would that be okay, or do you think Lloyd wants to be the one to send this out or reach out to everybody? And
I mean,
Dylan, I'm asking you.
yeah, I mean, I think that would be fine. I think honestly, you know, I don't know if anyone remembered any of the last, you know, previous changes to the neighborhood plan or anything, but I think so far, I mean, we've been as transparent as you can be. We're encouraging as much public participation as possible, and if anyone wants to attend these meetings, and you know, we've talked about how it's going to be a longer process maybe than usual, just because we want to have all opinions considered and do something that's actually a really good final product at the end. So, you know, I know that you've already blocked out saying, hey, you know, how about let's meet monthly? Well, that's under the assumption that we're going to be doing this for months. So
I think it's pretty clear that I think it's a safe assumption to say that this will
so
be
yeah, more than happy for
long-term.
people to chip in and just spread the word how they can, you know.
Okay.
Just one thing about going just to the chairs, and again, this is just because I've been doing this for a really long time. And I talk to a lot of board members. Some chairs are not great at sending stuff to the board members. I know Larry's great at it. I do it all the time, but I know you do. But there are chairs out there that just get stuff and they don't share it with their board members.
But see, they're not by themselves. Now that I'm a commissioner, I'm there to help them.
I get that, but some of them don't share just because they don't want to share. I'm just being blunt. You know, because they're like, oh, well, okay, fine, I'm not gonna.
So I take it if we send anything out like that in terms of information, it should just go directly to all board.
I just think it should go to all the board members, period.
Yeah.
That way, that one board member who didn't get it because the chair couldn't find their email address won't be coming here complaining that we weren't being transparent.
And I know there's always an opportunity, somebody to be filtering information.
And that's what I'm concerned about, filtering information.
It's undermined it, we can.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm here to help you too,
Okay.
you know, because I got a lot of, you and I both, and let's just do it together, work together on that, if that's okay.
I just thought Larry would be great because
No, Larry's
he's been doing, I know as a chair, I've been seeing emails from him for many
Yeah.
years now. So I know it'd be most welcome from
I
most
just
people.
assume you guys don't care what happens in my neck of the woods.
This is a quick question. When this committee have to really finish their work, meaning actually schedule a public hearings prior to it moving on to the final phase?
So the public hearings would take place after the commission, the full commission has decided on what changes that they would like to move forward. Basically, once you have a draft. Right now, you can have as many committee meetings as you want. You could have 100 committee meetings if you wanted. But once you have a draft and the commission adopts that draft, then it goes into a public hearing. where you have two public meetings, and then the commission takes that feedback and ultimately decides on what's a final, published document to then be forwarded to the mayor's office.
So.
Yeah, we
the
actually,
date, then we have to get this out.
well, and I will add, that there is a requirement, then the commission just sets a public date or a date that the public can, they just start next meeting and say, we will vote on it. That's just one last little requirement. So basically, yes, we have to have we will finish a version, then we send it to the commission. And there's no deadline. It just says, in fact, it has to be reviewed
Every 10 years.
periodically. Well, it does, but it doesn't, and we're actually reviewing it. So it doesn't say we have to revise it. We just review it. So there is really no deadline. I don't want to take that to mean that we're going to be doing this years down the line.
That's what they're.
But I mean, that's why, but that's why, but that is why it's important to sort of like, that's why I'm saying like, let's get an organization, then we can start breaking it down. Because I know once the public, and when I say the public, there are only probably a limited amount of people, but I can think of some issues like minutes that are going to rile some people's feathers and they're going to want to chime in. So I think, but once we start getting rolling, then we can break things into section and go down. And we have a lot of commissioners here, so I don't know if we're going to get a lot of feedback from the other commissioners. I expect it'll go pretty smoothly, but you never know. And sometimes all it takes is a question like, hey, did you think about this? Or did you analyze that enough? Or that type thing to kind of kick it back. But I do want to see us making progress. And that's why I would stress to say, let's get an organizational structure of how we want to do it.
I really like, Chair, what you've done, and if we can put that on the next agenda to support it and then use that as our structure. I like how
Yeah.
you flipped it. I always felt it was backwards, so thank
Yeah.
you for doing that. That
Oh,
was really
certainly.
great.
Well, and that was feedback from the staff too. So I
Excellent.
don't want to say that. Thank you.
One century.
So sometime.
I agree. I think keep it simple and identifying roles and responsibilities and administrative procedures. But there's one thing that's missing that I never got an answer to. I think because I never really thought about it. We have neighborhood assistants assisting us in our meetings. We have our executive secretary that's playing between us and Corp and trying to support everything we do and providing some oversight. There's nothing in here, roles and responsibilities of the NCO. There should be a section, roles and responsibilities.
The only thing that I would caution about that is that there is a provision in there that the commission does not have responsibility or, let's say, authority over the executive secretary and the office. So that might be beyond the purview of the plan.
Because I think there needs to be something in the plan to say, this is how we communicate with the NCO. And
And
also,
that could be under the board section, though, saying that this is how your boards communicate with the NCO. So that could be something under the board in terms of communication.
Okay.
Which is one example of how that could go wrong. The board member guidebook that you mentioned.
Yeah.
So we had to take that offline because we had too many issues. And if you don't remember that document, I thought it was helpful. When
I thought it was good.
It was great.
good for an employee to learn about how things kind of operate. It was different than the plan because it outlined NA duties, neighborhood assistant duties and responsibilities. Well, that's a problem because the boards are the minutes are the responsibility of the board. But everyone knows that the neighborhood assistants do that to alleviate the pressure from the board so that they can just come to the meeting and focus. Right. And then you probably wouldn't have a secretary. No one would be the secretary if that was their job. You look at every other board member and they don't have to pull that type of weight. So that's one example. Maybe we don't want to go that route. Things could change in the future. We have virtual now. We didn't have it before. Now we have the recordings of these meetings, just like this one, that's going to go on our YouTube. And that's the best record of what happened at the meeting. It might be hard to read the nameplates, but it can always be questioned who was there. You can ask the staff. I can identify people, stuff like that. But it's verbatim what happened. So that's just my one hesitation with that.
Okay, well, but that's a specific, idea for provision. So let's keep that in mind when we get to
Write
that
it down.
point. Well, no, seriously, when we get to that point. But so I'm sorry, just so going forward, just to reiterate, well, did anyone have any last thoughts or? So
I did
yeah,
want
go
to
ahead.
ask you that in the future, when you put this together, if you could give us a read ahead. So that way I could have studied this before we came in and I might have had. some
I
notes.
didn't finish it until this afternoon, to be quite honest.
Larry Murray before his meeting.
Yeah, so that was one of the issues, and it's sort of one of those things that it takes a little bit of time, and you sort of think, okay, well, if they really hate it, and I'm going to spend all this time doing it, so there was that balance, but I'll get it up as soon as possible. I will try to send it. I'll try to send it tomorrow. I'll definitely send it by tomorrow
Great work.
and get that out. So just so you know, things have been moving around. The numbering is a little wonky when it comes to the actual provisions because I didn't know if we'd like that. So when if the committee decides they want to go that route, it's easy to change. And so we can update it. So so please, for the next meeting, think about the organization. It's not perfect in how everything fits together. So you have tomorrow, you should have availability of the documentation. I guess we'll have a shared Google Drive set up.
We'll create that.
And so, well, let's say not tomorrow, the next day. So it will be done by that time. So, yeah, and please look at it and give any thoughts or, any thoughts you might have about moving things around or, where things might be more properly placed. Hopefully it's good, but I tried to leave the bulk of the sections together. What I would suggest is, there might be some things I know we talked about with complaints is to actually kind of get rid of that section and put it more in, kind of trim it down a little bit. At least that's the point of view of the NCO. I don't know how the committee will think about it, but when we get to that point, just know that there might be little things like that that'll be moved around, and there would be some suggested stuff I would take out or move around. Like for instance, I would say the purpose needs to be pretty close to the top. I think the first one is like the neighborhood. It said this is the neighborhood plan. That's fine, but 102 should be what the purpose of the plan and the boards are. But I didn't do that because I wanted to wait until the board had a chance or the committee had a chance to look at it. So anyway, those are my final thoughts. And does anyone have any last thoughts? Yes, sir.
Are we rolling with, the next meeting will be?
August 19th at 6:00
Yeah.
at the same location. Crab, did you have any, or Cross? Cross, do you have any last things you want to offer or you're still awake? I'm sorry. No, it's all right. But, or anybody else? Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. I'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Yay. Job. Thank you,
Thank you.
Patrick. That was awesome.